Okay. And I just want to give everybody a little bit of context here. I appreciate Caroline coming on. If you're a regular ASCE member, you kind of follow events. The report card was released very recently. Then we had the congressional fly-in. So Caroline's been extremely busy the last month. But part of the reason, the motivation behind having Caroline come and speak to us is we want to explore, kind of this larger national good that comes from investing in infrastructure, investing in the built environment, kind of some of the economic benefits that derive from that as part of the framing of the summer workshop. So I just kind of wanted to kind of give you all that little bit more of that context because we want to try to get as much benefit out of this content as possible. So with that, Caroline, please, I see your first slide, so you seem to be good to go.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that, Dan. And thank you everyone for having me today. So I will go over the findings of the 2025 Report Card for America's Infrastructure, which was just released on March 25th. We had an event in Washington, D.C. with a series of panels throughout the course of the day, which you can still stream if you want to check it out, where we really went into depth on a lot of not just the grades, but all of the solutions that are included in the report card. So today, I will share some of those findings and the methodology, as well as the key solutions that are included as part of the report card. I think as we talk about it, a lot of the national attention really goes to that overall economic impact as well as those overarching grades. But at the end of the day, the report card does have key solutions that are tied to every single one of the 18 categories that we grade, as well as some overarching solutions, which I want to go over with everybody today. So first, how do we come to what is the infrastructure report card? At ASCE, the report card is prepared by our Committee on America's Infrastructure, which is comprised of 52 civil engineers who are really the technical experts in each one of these 18 categories that we grade. That committee, along with ASCE staff, is then really focused on making sure we're evaluating all the relevant data and reports from government agencies, because everything in the report card is based in publicly available data. We're working closely with the private sector. We're working with other nonprofits and industry stakeholders to really make sure we are gaining a very wide view of each segment of the nation's infrastructure. The committee then examines each category. They provide all of the context before determining a grade, and they're looking at 8 different key criteria. Those key criteria you can see here on this slide, but the one I do want to point out here for this group is that we are looking at how resilient each category is, essentially on a national basis. So we're really looking at what the infrastructure system's capability is to prevent or protect against any sort of significant multi-hazard threats and incidents. We're also looking at how quickly any infrastructure systems are able to recover or reconstituting critical services after there's an event. And making sure that there will be minimal consequences to public health and safety, the economy, national security, if there was any sort of significant event and that infrastructure system were to fail. What would those impacts be? So, did want to just highlight that resilience one for all of you, but you can see all 8 key criteria here. The other thing I want to just briefly touch on, I won't read all of these for you, but we do have descriptions for how we classify each grade. So as you look at what those grades are, you can kind of have a sense for where we're at. Overall, it's very rare for us to actually grade anything ever an F. I think in our state report cards, Puerto Rico's grid right after Hurricane Maria got an F. And a long time ago, one of the first iterations of the report card, because we have been doing this every 4 years since 1998, I believe schools also got an F, and that was truly due to a lack of national data, which is still a struggle for schools. So with that, let me take us to what the actual grades are for 2025 and break them down a little bit for you. For the first time ever in this report card, America's cumulative GPA is a C. That's the highest it's ever been. And for the first time since we started this process in 1998, no category received a D- grade. So the C grade is a slight improvement from where we were in 2021. Our overall GPA in 2021 was a C-. So that's really indicating that we're starting to make some progress here around the margins in some pretty key infrastructure sectors. And in fact, if you look at the report card that we have here, across all of the categories, 16 categories saw their grades either increase or stay the same. 8 categories actually saw the grades go up, and only 2 categories actually saw a drop in the grade. Um, the other thing I just want to quickly flag for you here with all the grades that I didn't mention before is that we did grade broadband, and this was the first time we ever actually graded broadband as a category. But I think what you see here with all of these grades and with so many categories going up and seeing that GPA going up again is that since the last report card in 2001, that was before we saw the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act pass. That was before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the CHIPS and Science Act. Essentially, this report card has really demonstrated that when the federal government steps up and invests in infrastructure, that we're able to really start to see some progress and start to see our overall infrastructure investment gap decrease. Just the two grades that I did mention that did go down, those are energy and rail. Just specifically as to why those went down in the energy sector, we saw that grade go down really because of the increased demands on the system and the electrification of so many different sectors and just not being able to keep our grid not being able to keep up with a lot of those demands. Also seeing things like AI and data centers really increasing demand on these systems. So that's the primary reason why you see that energy grade going down. And then in the rail sector, we're seeing that grade going down primarily because of recent safety issues. It's not just East Palestine. There's been a rise in incidents on America's rail system. While yes, it's still a very safe system, when the committee was doing the larger assessment, they did believe that a slight downgrade in the grade to a B minus, still the second highest grade on the report card, was warranted. Other kind of grade that I want to point out here, transit for the first time ever, it is no longer a D minus. It's actually gone up to a D in this report card. A lot of that's really due to the increased investments that we have seen, again, from some of those pieces of federal legislation that are out there. So again, when we're seeing investments, when we're seeing the federal government invest, we're starting to see these grades increase. And as we are moving forward and going to like the 2029 report card, if we sustain this trajectory, we hope that we can only see further improvements down the line. Beyond just the grades, though, I did mention we do have some key solutions. We do identify some key trends. The report card overall does try to demonstrate the crucial need for the new administration and for Congress to continue investments in our infrastructure systems to make sure we're building on that progress to improve our infrastructure after truly decades of deferred maintenance and underinvestment. So some of these overarching trends that we did see, these are trends that cut across all 18 categories, include the increase in extreme weather events, which is no surprise to this group here, really the need for sustained investments, and also the need for reliable and available data on key performance indicators. This is something in some categories like levees and schools, a lot of publicly available data is not there. And if we aren't able to properly assess our infrastructure, it's hard to identify where the needs are and therefore what projects we need to be prioritizing. Additionally, as we've been having a lot of these conversations here, as we're looking at some of these key trends, as if we're able to better invest in our infrastructure systems, it really is going to, in the long term, be a savings for taxpayers. It's going to create a stronger economy. It's going to create American jobs, and it's going to really improve our resiliency and our connectivity. So those are some of the key trends. I did mention the investment gap. I want to briefly go over that as well. I think as most people just discuss the report card and some of the main headlines you see is going to be that C, and it's going to be this nearly $3.7 trillion that you see on your screen. So the 2025 report card does project an overall investment gap of close to $3.7 trillion over the next decade. So that's 2024 to 2023. This is up from about a $2.6 trillion investment gap from the 2021 report card. But that $2.6 trillion, that is not a number that I've adjusted for inflation for 2025 dollars. That's just one thing to keep in mind, just not a direct comparison. Again, with this investment gap, we have started to see the gap in certain key sectors, particularly in the transportation sectors, actually start to decrease from where we were previously. This overall increase in the investment gap is actually mostly just contributed by two different sectors, energy and the water sectors. That's where we're really seeing needs exploding. And that is why we saw this investment gap go up. For the first time ever, broadband is a category where it actually looks like investments are matching what the needs are. So we want to make sure we're keeping that trajectory up. And again, in some of these sectors, we are starting to see that gap close. So it's transportation, it's inland waterways and ports. We are seeing improvements, but the explosion in needs in energy and water have really what have driven this overall investment gap to go up. At ASCE, we also produced another report called Bridging the Gap, which came out last year, about a year ago, where we are assessing what the overall impacts of not investing in our infrastructure systems are costing American dollars, American families, and American businesses. And that report found that each American household is losing about $2,000 annually due to faulty infrastructure. However, if we were not to sustain these investments going forward, we'd only see these numbers further balloon, and American families would stand to lose about an additional $700 a year if we are not sustaining investments going forward. Next, our key solutions that we have across all the different categories. So before I mention those trends that we found, here are some of the solutions. So I've already said this, I'll say it again. ASCE is strongly urging sustained investments that are prioritizing resiliency to make sure we're raising our national infrastructure grade over the next 4 years. Advancing policy and embracing innovation are really going to be critical to ensuring our infrastructure systems can continue to improve, that they continue to stay strong. But really, it's going to be sustaining that investment that is going to create jobs and really help grow the economy. So you can see here, as we're talking about some smart investments, and kind of sustaining these investments here, we want to make sure that dollars are really wisely allocated. We want to make sure that we're starting off and maintaining existing funding levels. So as we're talking about reauthorization of any of these programs, we believe that the levels that were included in the IIJA should be our new baseline going forward. That is where all of our advocacy efforts are starting out right now. And when it comes to resilience at ASCE, obviously, we believe that's critical for the built environment. You all know what the overall costs are for not building resiliently, and what a lot of these disasters are already costing the economy. So we're trying to make sure we're having that discussion and really trying to talk through what those impacts are to make sure we are integrating resilience into all the infrastructure that we are building. For the sake of time, I won't go through and read all of these off for all of you, but as we are looking at each one of these key themes, we do have specific policy solutions related to them. And then if you go into each chapter page, and all of this is available on infrastructurereportcard.org, I can put the link into the chat. You will see that there are actually key solutions per chapter as well. So we have these three overarching ones, but if you then go into transit, you will see, say, 5 to 8 really specific transit solutions as well. A lot of them are tied to either sustaining investment, resiliency, advancing policy and innovations, and you can check all of those out on our website. Here are some of the ones more specifically, as we are looking at resilience, making sure that we really are enabling communities to develop and institute their own resilience pathways, making sure we're incentivizing and enforcing the most up-to-date codes and standards. That has really been a big push for us here at ASCE, making sure we're encouraging asset management practices, that we're spending all these dollars wisely, making sure that we are really trying to advocate and push for the fact that our infrastructure is a system of systems. If any one part of that system fails, the entire thing could fail. Making sure that we're prioritizing projects that are improving sustainability and safety, as well as making sure we are enhancing our infrastructure systems by the use of green infrastructure solutions and nature-based solutions. And then last but not least, you can see some of the specific solutions as they relate to policy and innovation. So this is more focused on things like the reliable data, making sure we have the engineering workforce in place, and making sure that the permitting process allows projects to get done on time and on budget. So I did mention that all of this is up on our website. So please check it out at infrastructurereportcard.org. We also have a lot of really interactive maps. We have more state-specific information on all 50 states, All of our state report cards are there as well. We have partnered with ESRI to do some story mapping around resilience. So that's something that I think would be of interest for all of you, and it's definitely worthwhile to check out. And then last but not least, we're really in the place right now that we are trying to push this message out. So we're exactly 2 weeks since the report card was mentioned. Here are some of the stats and kind of our reach in just that first week alone. We had a really good first week of media hits, but this report card we know is going to continue to kind of be the go-to source for infrastructure for really the next 4 years, because we were getting calls in the 2021 report card in early last March, or this past March. So we're really trying to make sure we're getting the word out and having as many conversations as we can about the report card with policymakers, really honing in on that resiliency conversation in the days that were immediately preceding the release of the report card. We also had our legislative fly-in. So we had close to 300 engineers going up to all of their congressional offices to share this report and share a lot of the messaging that's in there as well. So with that, I will pause, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Caroline. There's so much to unpack here. John, go ahead. You've got your hand up.
Thanks, Caroline. Awesome brief overview. I think it was maybe 3 slides before the last bullet on policymakers and infrastructure leaders must work together. It talks about support, research, and development. That's before this, I think. There you go. See that bottom one? I think that has a very strong connection to this task force, and especially recognizing the gap, the need in terms of infrastructure consensus standards, right? That unlike the consensus standards for the buildings and structures that we live and work in, the standards, so to speak, for various infrastructures are very fragmented, and vary from state to state, and many states have their own. So I think that last bullet kind of gets at that, but would like to see that mature into, and that recognizes that the underlying standards also need to be brought forward in terms of state of the state, state of the art, recognizing innovation, technology, and a sense of current and future risk.
Oh, that's an excellent point. And I would add, these are kind of the overarching solutions that are hitting on all 18 categories. If you go into some of those category pages, you will definitely see more specific recommendations where we are talking about things like Atlas 15 and making sure we're continuing to fund that. So we do get much more granular on what some of these mean in those chapter recommendations.
Excellent. Bilal?
Yes, first of all, thank you very much. I mean, ASCE really does outstanding job in advancing the state of our infrastructure, and this report is quite impactful, and thank you for presenting it. Recently I was reading a report by Larry Fink. Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock, and it was written to basically his investors. It came out just recently, last week, in April 2025. And he talks about infrastructure in it. And basically, he sees an opportunity. He thinks enhancing or advancing infrastructure is beyond the capacity, the fiscal capacity of governments. And he's talking about, the US as well as globally. There is big need shortage globally as well. And what he's offering, and he's putting it as a strategic item for BlackRock, is to have private investment coming in. And the way he's structuring it is by what he calls tokenization of infrastructure. So basically, you'll be able to literally have a ticker for a major infrastructure where investors could buy in. It's almost like a fund. And it will, of course, it has to be profitable, whether through fees or some system has to be created. So I just want to bring that to your attention. So I wonder if if the report eventually could move more in that direction. I know the purpose of it is for informing, members of Congress and policy and so on, but it could be policy related to the financial aspects of it for funds and so on to encourage. I think it's a way it's a way forward, and I was very pleased to see the report and the details in there. If you just, I'll find the link and I'll put it in the chat for people to read. Thank you.
Well, I could talk about this report all day. So I was trying to be concise, but you are correct. Financing is a huge piece of this. And when we talk about that overall infrastructure investment gap, what I didn't say, but which is very important to note, is that that gap, if we make sure when we're talking with federal officials, is not a bill for the federal government. That is for federal government, it's for state and local governments, but it's also for the private sector. So we have really been working very closely with the private sector, looking at different ways that we could be financing infrastructure projects. In fact, at the summit that we had just 2 weeks ago, we dedicated an entire panel where we brought in the Global Infrastructure Investors Association. We brought in Deloitte for a conversation about what the future of financing infrastructure is as we're going forward. So you really bring up an important point, and financing is going to really be critical to closing that gap. And we're going to have to partner with the private sector in order to do so.
No, I think this is the conference Dan and we attended, right? Didn't we, Dan?
Yes, you were there. Yes, you were there.
Oh, absolutely, of course. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very good.
Thanks, Caroline. I'm going to come back to that, but Terry has her hand up, so I'm going to go to Terry.
Yeah, thank you. It's amazing to see what impact this report card has had over the time that it's been available, and I can really see advancements in the messaging and how the data is being presented. Caroline, I'm with NIST, and so one thing we really focus on is what I'll call measurement science. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering, is there any report or anything that would help us understand the public data that you're able to access to inform these reports, and then the metrics that you're using? I saw your comment about needing improved metrics, because that's a space where we're very interested in, and it would be great if there was data available or something we could refer to.
So I don't have like a separate, I would say in terms of the data that we are accessing, if you go into the full report, every single piece of data is cited, and you can see all of the resources that we are utilizing in the source notes at the end of every single chapter. So everything is, we were meticulous with our citations. I think when it comes down to some of the data, we have some categories like bridges where states have to report out their bridge data on an annual basis in order to get their formula funds. And we have so much, there's just a plethora of data. But when we have a category like schools, which is much more a local investment, it's very difficult to actually find a national data set of what the condition of our nation's schools are. You get some information about, HVAC systems and some of these other facets of it, and like the overall age, but it's very difficult to find what that is since it is more local. Levies is another one where we've actually seen improvement over as we've gone through the report card. When we first were grading levies, there was no national levy safety program, and there was no national levy database. We're starting to see, we have that now, but all the data isn't in that levy database yet. We're still collecting that. We still don't know what all the levies are in our nation, in the nation. So we've seen some progress in some areas, but other categories are just really lacking some of that data. Broadband, another one. It's a new category. The issue there isn't necessarily that the data isn't known; it's that it's proprietary, and that the ISPs don't want to share that data with us. So we're relying on the FCC maps, and FCC maps are constantly under question. So it's a different conversation by category in terms of what some of the needs are. But I'd be happy to also offline with you, or if you have any questions as you're looking through some of the sources and what we're utilizing to answer those questions, or if not me, someone else on my team who maybe was more in the weeds on developing those chapters and looking through those reports.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Caroline, this is almost a segue into the next discussion, which is the workshop program, but please bear with me. One of the things that, first of all, I'd be interested in any insights you can kind of share from the congressional fly-in. I think a big part of the why the infrastructure report card has had impact and why ASCE's invested in it is because it does focus on primarily civil infrastructure, and that means a significant federal investment. So it makes sense that ASCE would be engaging in Congress around this. So I've kind of got two different questions. One is, when we start talking about resilience and we're talking about losses from natural hazard related disasters, a lot of those losses are to residential homes, commercial real estate, other components of the built environment, not just civil infrastructure. And we've had conversations on here, even in the task force, about going back and forth between, are we really talking about infrastructure or are we talking about the built environment? And where we are going into the workshop is, we definitely see it as a broader question of resilience in the built environment because, I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect like something like wildfires, the civil infrastructure probably actually performs better or survives a little bit better than residential homes and commercial property. So do you have any thoughts on like how we can kind of bridge that discussion? Because I think that's something that I'm hoping to work with you on as we start to prepare for the workshop.
Yeah, I think from a lot of the conversations, this kind of ties into where we were at the fly-in. I think a lot of these conversations, whether it's residential or civil, as we're talking about a lot of these losses, there's a huge impact to American families and the overall economy. And I think it's about trying to make that case and try to have the discussion that, it's, yes, we need the civil infrastructure. This needs to be resilient. If there is a disaster, we need to be able to get goods to the community. We're going to need bridges and stuff to do that. We're going to need the airports, which are some of the infrastructure that is most utilized if there is a disaster. We need to get all that infrastructure in place in order to get other aid out to the communities. So I think that's part of the discussion. We've been having a lot of conversations with the Build Strong Coalition and the insurance industry as well, just in terms of what some of this messaging needs to be and how can we really have the insurance industry help push that, by building more resiliently, it will be a cost savings in the long run. And the conversation we're trying to have, especially with a lot of congressional Republicans, is that just as a wise investment. If we don't have to continue to rebuild after a disaster, we're wisely using limited federal dollars. And that there's not any sort of, waste as we're going forward. So those are a lot of conversations.
Uh-oh. What happened?
Programs say, like the Protect. See a lot more.
I'm having a little connectivity issues here of my own. But anyway, I'm sure I heard
My broadband was
of that, and so it sounds good. My last little question, and Bilal, you might need to be prepared to take over if I go down totally, is the kind of the question that I had was, I know what. In terms of other secondary benefits, for example, job creation, you talked about job creation, et cetera. It seems like a lot of the focus right now in terms of the administration's economic development concepts are really focused more on restoring manufacturing and making it more of a manufacturing economy, et cetera. But can we make a plausible case about like how many jobs would be created with these additional investments in terms of direct construction jobs or other kinds of benefits that would be derived from these investments?
We do. So if you go in our Bridging the Gap report, it shows that over the course of the next 10 years, if we sustain investments, that we would preserve, I think it's 237,000 American jobs. So we do have some of that data that we're able to point to when it comes to some of these investments and what their benefits are. I think that's why it's also some of the data, in terms of it's saving American families $700 a year if we sustain these investments. So they're not having to go and replace all their groceries when their electricity goes out. They don't have a flat tire because they hit that pothole. So it's trying to really bring that conversation home to what the impacts are on American families in terms of some of the broader conversation that's happening right now on supply chain and economics and tariffs. A lot of that is still, we have to kind of wait and see what some of the impacts are going to be and where things actually fall. So at ASCE, we are still looking at that very closely. We're looking to see if we need to revamp any of the policies that we have. Do we need a stronger policy on supply chain and making sure we don't have supply chain disruptions, which essentially just lead to projects not being able to be done on time and on budget, and in many cases will just get canceled. So that's all something that we're looking at right now. And of course, it is extremely fluid.
All right. Thank you so much.